Big news out of the Supreme Court. The Chief Justice of the United States of America has just issued a rare and extraordinary statement responding directly to President Trump's call to impeach the federal judge presiding over his Alien Enemies Act case. I want to go straight to Paula Reed. Paula, I have to say, this is an enormously significant moment. This is a massive development, Dana. What we are witnessing right now is the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, John Roberts, publicly pushing back against statements President Trump made earlier today in which he explicitly suggested that Judge James Boasberg should be impeached. Judge Boasberg, as you know, is the federal district judge who temporarily blocked, or at least attempted to block, a series of deportations being carried out by the Trump administration. And now the Chief Justice has issued a statement that reads in full: for more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose. The statement itself is remarkably brief, just 2 sentences long, but what it communicates could not be more consequential. This is the leader of the judicial branch drawing a bright line and saying the president crossed it. This is indeed a major moment in the life of American democracy. The Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court is pushing back directly after President Trump suggested that Judge James Boasberg should be impeached for blocking the administration's deportation flights. John Roberts delivered a message that was unmistakably clear. Impeachment is not the answer when a president disagrees with a judge's ruling. That is precisely what the appeals process was designed for, established over 2 centuries ago and reaffirmed across countless generations. The statement was short, but the warning it carried was profound. The Chief Justice was not offering a suggestion. He was issuing a correction, and every word of it was aimed squarely at the Oval Office. Earlier today, in a Truth Social post that was characteristically explosive, President Trump went on an extended tangent expressing his fury at this particular judge, declaring that Judge James Boasberg, and I am quoting his words here, like many of the crooked judges I am forced to appear before, should be impeached. This comes just several days after Judge Boasberg tried to temporarily block some of the deportations being pushed forward by the Trump administration. And what happened next is absolutely critical to understanding this entire conflict. The Trump administration did not abide by the judge's order to turn around 2 planes that had already departed. During what can only be described as a highly contentious hearing yesterday, the Justice Department insisted before the court that they were not required to follow the judge's oral order delivered from the bench, a position the judge took serious issue with, but it went even further than that. Even after the judge had issued a formal written order, the administration still did not comply. In court yesterday, government lawyers were arguing that the reason they did not need to comply with that written order was because President Trump possesses sweeping and essentially unreviewable executive authority when it comes to foreign affairs. And the reason this entire case carries such enormous significance, Dana, is because it represents something far bigger than just another test of Donald Trump's expansive vision of executive power. This case is testing the fundamental question of whether the president and his legal team genuinely believe that he can be checked by the courts at all. So here we are, watching Judge James Boasberg receive support and reinforcement from the most senior justice in the land, and that support is coming in the form of a public statement that breaks with decades of institutional practice precisely because the moment demanded it. This was the moment the ground shifted under American democracy, not in some slow, distant, barely perceptible way that historians might debate and dissect years from now. This happened in real time, unfolding right in front of the country as a direct warning issued from the highest levels of the judicial branch. A sitting Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, one of the very few people entrusted with protecting the constitutional order, was now being pulled into a confrontation that no one could afford to ignore. What made this so remarkable was not just what the Chief Justice said, but the speed and the directness with which he said it. John Roberts does not issue statements casually. He does not insert himself into political disputes unless the circumstances leave him with no other responsible choice. And today, he decided that silence was no longer an option. Yeah, your eyes are going wide, David Chalian. It is genuinely astonishing, and I want to be very careful here. I do not want to diminish the significance of the specific case that Paula is describing, because that case matters enormously in its own right. But what is happening here is so much bigger than any single deportation flight or any single judicial ruling. I just want to take a step back here because I have heard so many people over the last couple of days asking questions like, are we actually in a constitutional crisis or not? Is the administration truly defying a court order? Should we parse whether it was a written order or merely a verbal one? Is it too early to get genuinely worked up about this? Should we wait and see what happens next? And now John Roberts, a man who does not choose to insert himself into the political fray under any circumstances unless absolutely forced to, has effectively answered all of those questions in one statement. He is saying, no, it is not too soon. I am the figure who sits atop one of the three co-equal branches of government as designed by the Constitution of the United States. And it is not too soon for me to say, back off, Mr. President. You should not be talking about impeaching a district court judge, a district-level judge, simply because you do not like the ruling that judge issued. That is not how the last 2 centuries of American governance have worked. The constitutional framework has always provided a remedy for disagreement with judicial decisions. And that remedy is the appellate process, not the removal of judges through impeachment. And I think what we are seeing here is significant on multiple levels. First, John Roberts does not get involved very often. And the fact that he has chosen to step in so directly here demonstrates the gravity of the moment. You can see he is responding specifically to what Trump posted on Truth Social this morning. He is not issuing some abstract lecture about judicial independence. He is answering the president directly. Second, the sheer speed and assertiveness of this pushback against President Trump, the choice to speak out publicly and to speak the way he did in this statement, should cause every American to take serious note of this moment. What I find particularly striking about this statement is that the Chief Justice could have chosen any number of ways to address this situation. He could have issued a more diplomatic, less pointed remark. He could have waited. He could have let the controversy play out for a few more days. But he did not do any of those things. He issued a statement that was laser-focused, deliberately concise, and unmistakably directed at the president. That tells us something about how seriously he views what is happening right now. The Chief Justice was responding to an attack not just on a single judge, but on the very architecture of the judicial system itself. For a president to call for the impeachment of a judge because he disagrees with a ruling is to challenge the foundational principle that courts must be free to interpret the law without fear of retaliation. Roberts was not defending Judge Boasberg's ruling. He was defending the system that gives every judge the right to make rulings without being threatened with removal by the executive branch. This was not a normal moment in American politics, and Roberts understood that. The Chief Justice does not issue press releases lightly. He is deeply protective of the Supreme Court's institutional reputation, and he is equally protective of the broader judiciary's independence. For him to step forward and issue this statement, knowing full well the political firestorm it would generate, was a signal that the situation had become too dangerous to ignore. What we are watching is a direct confrontation between the executive branch and the judicial branch, and the Chief Justice has just made it clear that the judiciary will not stand by silently while its independence is attacked. The question now is whether the president will heed that warning or whether he will escalate further. And if history is any guide, that question remains very much unanswered.